Hello weekend warriors, welcome back to the workshop. Today's quick video is going to be about making throat plates for my table saw, or your table saw, or anybody's table saw. Doesn't matter what kind of table saw you have, mostly. The process is pretty much the same for all of them. Now in this case I'm not actually making it for my table saw, I'm actually making a new throat plate for the router function that we did in the last video. But it uses the same plate, so I can make a few. And, well, what the heck, let's just get on into it. So, hang on. Got a little bit of rework to do on the camera, and then we'll get on to it. Stand by. Alright, the first step, of course, is to choose your material. My material is some old laminated flooring that I had a few spare pieces of, and it's a nice fit. So that's what we're going to use this time. Now, all I did, of course, was here's one of my throat plates that I've got. This one happens to be for the shaper function. The inside's a little bit too wide for what I want to do next, so that's why I'm making a new plate here. Anyway, so I've got a few pieces, because if I'm going to make one, I may as well make a few. So next time I need a zero clearance plate or whatever, I've got one ready to go. So here's one I've already got clamped up. First thing I did was rough cut the shape. Doesn't have to be perfect right this second. Just has to be rough cut. Alright, now what I want to do is mark off the mounting holes, because I'm going to use the mounting holes to help me shape the plate on the router. So I've got it clamped down real nice. I've got a transfer punch here, so I'm just going to take that transfer punch and get myself a couple of dimples for my drill press. And now we're ready to go to the drill press. I'm going to punch out the rest of these too, but you don't need to watch that. So y'all hang on and I'll be right back. Okay, so now that we've got our bolt holes located, it's just time to drill them out. Now this is going to be a two-step process. First I'm going to drill out a 1/4 inch hole, because my binder bolts are 1/4 inch by 20 screws. And then I'm going to countersink them to accept the flathead, below the surface. So, simple. Now, if I wasn't shooting a video, of course, I would drill all 4 of them out all at the same time and then countersink all 4 at the same time, but we don't have time for that. So I'll go and do that off camera later. Okay, so now we have a blank ready for sizing. So that's the next step. And that's going to be 2 steps, and you'll see in just a second. Okay, now that we've got all the holes drilled, we can go ahead and size the plates up. And what I've done is, and what I forgot to mention before, is I needed a spacer to go in between the original plate, and my homemade plate, because the edge on the original plate is too thin. And there's a slight gap here between my bearing and the cutting edge on my flush trim bit. And yes, I'm using a flush trim bit in my Shopsmith router here. And so that bearing is going to ride on the original plate, and then the cutting edge is going to go ahead and it's going to cut cleanly on the edge of my homemade plate. So, piece of cake. Here we go. Oh, and I have to be rather careful when I'm bringing it up to the cutting edge, because I have no pins in this plate to ease it with, and it's going to want to grab and pull away from me. So that's something to be cautious of. Okay, and there we have nice clean edge. And this plate is going to be exactly the same size as this plate. Now, a word on the spacer. The spacer I cut just a little bit short of everything. Because like I said, there's a gap here. And if it wasn't cut short, it would, as a cut, it would want to go into that gap. And then I'd have this flange hanging out and it would bind up the router motor. And we don't want that. So there we have it. I can go ahead and do the rest of them, and then I need to size them to depth. Okay, now that I've got some perfectly sized plates cut out, what I've done here is I've swapped the throat plate in my router table. I've clamped a sacrificial block to my fence here, and I added a dado cutter to my router. Now to set the depth for that dado cutter, what I did was I pulled the throat plate out completely and dropped my blank in without the bit being in place. And then I drew a line where all the exposed part, because this thing was sitting too thick. So I drew a line for the depth of cut that I'm going to need. So now I just turn that thing over. I've brought my bit up to match, so it will obliterate that line as we cut, but not so deep that I'm going to have a recessed throat plate. And now I'm ready to cut it out. But first thing I got to do is I got to pull up my fence here until only about half of this cutter is showing. Because this is a 3/4 inch. I want about 3/8, so that gives me about that'll give me 3/8 or half the cutter. So I'm going to turn that thing on. Okay. So now I'll fix that in place, and I'm going to cut out the bottom here. Now I'm going to be real careful going around the corners because, of course, this really doesn't lend itself to cutting a round shape very well. But I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to take a Forstner bit and drill out the remaining that I'm going to need. Well, the remaining I'm going to need under here to match the tabs that are on either end of the table. Once again, your saw may vary. Set my clamp here just a little bit low. So I want to raise it up just a touch here. That right there looks pretty darn good. So let's go ahead and... Okay, here we are. Now you see I've used my Forstner bit and I've hollowed out a portion on either end, and that fits these little nuggets there on either side. So when I stick this thing down into the groove, it sits nice and flush on my table. Okay. So now I'm going to screw the guy down. So let me pull that off. One thing I've got on all my power tools with iron casings are rare earth magnets. So I don't lose the screws and stuff like that you always have to take on and off. And I got some place to put my the tools that you have to use on these things. So my Allen wrenches and stuff like that. Okay, now I'm going to use this thing for this particular one for a specific purpose, and that's going to be for my box joint jig that fits this table. So, and it's only going to be for the real small box joints, you know, say 1/4 inch or 3/16 of an inch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill myself a 3/8 inch hole through the middle of this thing, because I just don't want very much space on either side of my workpiece, because I'm talking 1 1/4, 1.5 inch workpieces. So I don't want a big space that I have to bridge across and possibly get a bad angle on. So what I've done here is I've mounted up my drill chuck underneath on the motor head, and I'm going to spin the speed down to a decent drilling speed, and I'm going to drill from the bottom up and out. That's why I secured it down. So do that. And reduce. There we go, that's a reasonable speed. And then I'm going to just ease that 3/8 inch bit up and through. And there we go. This throat plate is complete, and it's ready for the next part of the project, which will be the next video. I'm going to go ahead and set the rest of the blank plates up so they'll sit down nice and flush in the tables, and decide what I need to use them for, when I need to use them. So that's it for that, and that's it for this video. So until I see you next time, you guys keep up the good fight, and I'll see you when I see you. Bye.